So as we get into Flashpoint Part 3, what we do here is we backtrack for a second and we're going to cover the story of Wonder Woman and the Furies. Now, this particular story gives us the events, or at least one part of the events, that led up to the conflict between Wonder Woman and Aquaman. But more so than that, it tells us why Europe is in such disarray. Now, Dan Abnett was the one that gave us the story, and he actually did it in a really good way. He did a really awesome job with helping us come to grips with everything that's happened so far. What we're told is that with Arthur Curry at a young age, instead of falling in love with Mira and marrying her as his queen, instead he had met Wonder Woman. Now, the two of them had simply just met each other by virtue of their own adventure and their own celebration, and in truth, this is basically Dan Abnett telling us that Arthur Curry is the stand-in for Steve Trevor. Instead of Steve Trevor being the first man that Wonder Woman meets and eventually falls in love with, instead, she ends up falling in love with Arthur Curry. Now, they're both attacked by a sea monster, or at least she's attacked by a sea monster, and Arthur Curry comes to her rescue. But because of the fact that she is a character that, is strong in her own right with regards to being on New Themyscira, and because the Atlanteans don't usually deal with surface dwellers, in a lot of ways, their love was kind of forbidden. It was a very Romeo and Juliet sort of situation, in the sense that instead of it being their parents who were against the union between Wonder Woman and Aquaman, instead, it was actually a couple people. It was Artemis on the from New Themyscira, and it was Aquaman's brother Orm who were against this. Now, in terms of why they were against this and why they instigated this war in the first place, this will be covered as we get further into Flashpoint, simply because I don't want to give certain things away. But the fact remains that both Artemis and Orm had instigated what appeared to be an assassination on Wonder Woman at the hands of an Atlantean. And so a spear was thrown, and Queen Hippolyta had basically seen the spear coming at her daughter and dived in the way. The result was that she had died, and in return, Wonder Woman believed that it was an Atlantean. Now, this is later on revealed to actually be Artemis herself who had thrown the spear, and Aqualad had stepped in. I guess, the sidekick, Garth, the sidekick of Aquaman, had discovered what was going on, but in the confrontation, he was effectively killed, when he was thrown off a balcony. And so with the body of Garth showing up here, because Artemis had not been found, in the end, it was believed by the Amazons that the Atlanteans were engaging in war. They were attempting to use this union between Arthur Curry and Wonder Woman as a means to subvert Themyscira and take it over in its entirety. And so the result is that the Atlanteans are kicked off the island, and the Amazons begin the process of going through the traditional 3-day ritual to mourn the loss of their queen. Now, this puts both Aquaman and Wonder Woman in a tough situation, because in truth, they are king and queen first and their hero second. And what I mean by that is throughout their entire history, really more so with Aquaman than with Wonder Woman, Aquaman has always been in a situation where if it came down to the fact that Atlantis was being attacked and the Justice League was being attacked at the same time, he would choose Atlantis over Justice League almost every single time, just because he's a king first and he's a hero second. With Wonder Woman, it was never really the same way traditionally. She would always stand up for Themyscira, but she always recognized that her role was more significant to the world than it was to her people. And so she was always in a tough situation because she routinely had to choose between her own people and, the Earth as a whole, as humanity, and the relationships that she had forged alongside the other members of the Justice League. In Flashpoint, it's not that way. Because of the fact that she is now the queen, because of the fact that the perception is the Atlanteans are trying to wage war and trying to take over Themyscira, her loyalty is entirely to her people, especially considered the fact that the Justice League does not exist here. And so because of this, during this mourning phase, she's constantly getting, receiving words of poison from Artemis. At the same time, Aquaman is constantly receiving words of poison from his brother Orm, and they're basically seeding conflict between the two of them. They're seeding war between the two of them. Now, again, they're not necessarily wanting to do this, and what ends up happening here is Aquaman actually travels to Themyscira for the purpose of trying to mend this rift between the two of them. It's really an olive branch trying to make the case that yes, the death of Queen Hippolyta was very tragic, but it was not committed by Atlanteans. There's something else going on here. But because the Amazons are in a state of grief, because virtually all of them except for Artemis are unaware of the fact that it was actually a ploy that was going on that is designed to be a ruse, Artemis basically calls in an attack. She calls in a huge conflict between the Atlanteans and the Amazons, and the result is that, again, in the eyes of Wonder Woman, the Atlanteans are engaging in yet another instance of treachery. And so because of the fact that the Atlanteans seem to be winning the war, because of the fact that Wonder Woman's not aware of Artemis sabotaging the Amazons themselves to make it look like the Atlanteans are winning, in the end, Wonder Woman makes the case that they need to abandon, or at least she's kind of forced in a position to abandon Themyscira, to blow up the island and take refuge elsewhere. And this is exactly what she does. She basically sets off releases the restraints that are normally used in Themyscira and allows it to explode. Now, what I mean by this is, for those of you guys who don't know, and at least it's really cool because it's given to us by Dan Abnett as he gives us this explanation, the Themyscira exists on a volcano, and the Amazons harness the geothermal energy of this volcano in order to provide what they need for survival. The result is that restraints are needed in order to keep the volcano from going active and exploding. What Wonder Woman did is she removed these restraints. And so as the Atlanteans are fleeing for dear life, the island is exploding all around them. Now from here, Dan Abnett fast tracks a few things. He actually gives us information from the eyes of a reporter named Jack Ryder. And what he tells us is that after the destruction of Themyscira, its remaining citizens took off in fleets, and they basically went to Europe. They went to the United Kingdom, to England, as refugees. They looked to England to house them, to give them a place to stay temporarily until they could reform Themyscira. The problem is that England said no, and so Wonder Woman decided to take it by force. She literally launched an invasion of England. She presented herself to Parliament and basically justified her case, saying that we are in need of a home. Your home is as good as any. It now belongs to us. And this basically gives us a darker side of Wonder Woman, but it also tells us, even if indirectly behind the scenes, that maybe everything that she's doing isn't things that she wants to do. She's doing them because she has loyalty to her people. Her goal is to make sure that Themyscira has a home. And if that home means taking the home of somebody else, then that's what she will do. As a result, she also began gathering some of the most powerful women in DC Comics around her, calling them the Furies. Now, this is basically Dan Abnett paying a little bit of tribute to the history of Wonder Woman, in the sense that the Furies are actually an organization or a group that exists under Darkseid and is composed of his most powerful women. They are a force to be reckoned with, and there was actually a story where Wonder Woman was inducted into the Furies against her will for a time. And so this is basically Dan Abnett saying that even if we're not going to see Darkseid, even if we won't see his Furies, we will see some tribute to the concept of the Furies themselves. Now, while this is going on, while this conflict is taking place, we pick back up with Aquaman, and again, he's being put in a hard spot here. He's being put in a situation where he's being asked to do things that he doesn't really want to do. The idea is that because of the fact that the Amazons have wiped out Themyscira, because they have engaged in war, because both Atlantis and Amazons are at war with one another, the idea is that the Atlanteans need to repay in kind. They need to do something to show the Amazons that they are not to be pushed around, that they cannot simply be walked over. And so the idea is to basically lay waste to Themyscira by destroying England. And so while Aquaman doesn't want to do this, he also asks the question where his wife Mera is located. And so what we do is we switch to the port of Dover in England, in New Themyscira. And what happens is Mera makes her presence known. Mera basically attacks the Amazons along with a host of Atlantean soldiers. Now, while the Atlantean soldiers are holding their own against the Amazons, Mera and Wonder Woman engage in a fight with one another. And when they do, the fight is actually pretty swift. There's really not much of a contest here. Wonder Woman comes out on top and she cuts off the head of Mera. And because of this, because Mera is now, or at least because she was betrothed to Aquaman, he takes this as the utmost threat. He takes this as something that cannot be called back. And so he effectively declares open war on the Amazons for the first time in the midst of this conflict, and in doing so, orders the entire sinking of Europe at the hands of the Atlantean superweapons. Having said that, as we continue our discussion with the main Flashpoint story itself, we pick back up again with Thomas Wayne and Barry Allen. Now, I do apologize if I keep saying Bruce Wayne incidentally. It's just, I'm not used to saying Thomas Wayne Batman. It kind of throws me off kilter whenever I have to say that. I kind of have to pause and make sure that I didn't actually say Bruce Wayne. But if I happen to do that in the future of these videos, don't hold it against me. It's something I'm not used to saying Thomas Wayne Batman. It's just kind of crazy to me. But that's one of the reasons why this story is so cool, because it just gives us different depictions of characters that we've come to know and love. And so with Barry Allen having been electrocuted due to the fact that he was trying to get his powers back, the lightning storm simply just frying his body, where Thomas Wayne takes him back to the Batcave, tries to nurse him back to health. In the end, Barry Allen wants to try again. Now, from the perspective of Thomas Wayne, this is absolutely crazy, because in his mind, a guy just showed up on his doorstep, said he was the fastest man alive, got his powers that way because he was doused with chemicals and electrocuted, and when he tries to repeat the process, he just ends up getting fried again. But because of the fact that Barry Allen seems to have information on the way things are supposed to be, he can't help but believe Barry. He can't help but believe that if there's a single chance that Bruce Wayne lives instead of dies, that he has to help him here. Now, again, what Jeff Johns also does is he reminds us us that things are beginning to fracture, that things are beginning to change, that because of the fact that this new reality is totally different in the sense that Abin Sur is the Green Lantern instead of Hal Jordan, which if you guys are interested, I can do the story of whatever happened to Hal Jordan. Because of the fact that these memories are beginning to fragment, that Geoff Johns is reminding us they're on a timetable here. The time's running out, that they have to hurry up. And this is basically Barry Allen giving us this information saying that time is running out. They have to do something. And so in order for Bruce Wayne to live, in order for things to be turned back to normal, you know, Thomas Wayne has to help Barry get his powers back. And so what they do is they go right back to the rooftop again, and they go through the process of dousing Barry in chemicals yet again. And when Barry is electrocuted, this time it works, and his powers of the Flash are restored to him. And so what happens is that while Barry is recovering, because of the fact that his powers of the Flash grant him enhanced healing in the sense that he can recover from, you know, flesh injuries much faster than a normal human can, we transition to New Themyscira in London, and we pick up with Lois Lane. Now, this is actually really cool because this is basically Geoff Johns beginning the early stages of rolling, you know, Wildstorm characters, non-main DC characters over into DC's landscape. For those of you guys who don't know, DC Comics is only one facet of that big side of the comic arm. You've got Wildstorm, you've got Vertigo, which is their adult-oriented imprint. You've got a lot of different characters that hail from that side of the spectrum, you know, under the larger umbrella of DC. And the purpose of the New 52 was to take those characters and roll them over into a single continuity. And this is exactly what Geoff Johns is doing. During this entire situation where Lois Lane is trying to, you know, get back into contact with Steve Trevor, even though she doesn't know at the moment that he's been taken prisoner by the Amazons, what she does is she comes face to face with the Resistance, who's led by Grifter. Now, Grifter is a Wildstorm character. We don't really need to go super in-depth into him. Again, I think what we've said so far about, you know, Wildstorm and so on is enough to suffice our explanation. But more so than that, what this tells us is that the citizens of England didn't just roll over. It wasn't as though, you know, Wonder Woman showed up, invaded London, and they just kind of gave up and walked away. Instead, there's small pockets of resistance. The problem here is they're effectively going up against forces who are wildly powerful. Wonder Woman having power equivalent to that of Superman. And the result is that they were laid waste to almost immediately. You know, England was conquered almost right off the bat. And so they do the best they can, but to be honest here, they're basically fighting a losing battle. And so what we do is we jump back to Thomas Wayne, and he's looking, you know, at Barry Allen because of the fact that he has enhanced healing, because of the fact that he's recovering from his injuries extremely fast. This gives credence to the argument he's been making that things are not the way they're supposed to be. And so what Barry Allen does is he uses his super speed. He grabs different chemicals and so on and so forth, and he makes a new Flash costume super fast, which isn't really supposed to be something significant here. It's just sort of Geoff Johns giving us that, you know, yes, things are getting back on track. Yes, the story is moving forward. Yes, we're going to start seeing things return to a state of normalcy sort of moment, kind of the tipping point, so to speak, of the story at this point where things are going to start transitioning in favor of everyone. And so the one question Barry Allen has is, where is Superman? Because Superman is the one character who could literally change the entire tide of battle. Superman can go toe-to-toe with Aquaman and Wonder Woman and defeat them both, as well as give humanity something to aspire to. And so his question is, if Superman's not here, then where is he? Did he simply just not arrive on the planet Earth? Does his rocket never show up here? And so both he and Thomas Wayne start going through old footage, and we actually get some really cool explanation here on a couple things. One of the things that Geoff Johns shows us or tells us is that at some point in the past, Hal Jordan had piloted an experimental test plane. The reason why this matters is because that's how Hal Jordan became the Green Lantern originally. He was piloting a test plane, he was chosen by the ring of the dying Abin Sur, and he was inducted into the Green Lantern Corps. The rest is history. Geoff Johns doesn't really give us any more than this. Again, this is covered in a tie-in, but what we're also told is that the rocket of Superman did crash land in Metropolis. And so again, Barry Allen tells Thomas Wayne that Superman is the most powerful person on the planet. And so if they can find Superman, assuming that he's here, if they can locate him and assuming he's not a bad guy, have him fight on their behalf, they can quite literally save the world. And so while Thomas Wayne says that he doesn't know where Superman is, he knows a person who does. And so we pick up with Barry Allen and Thomas Wayne meeting with Cyborg, who again is working on behalf of the US government, and he has access to all their information. And so what he says is, yes, he will help them find Superman, but only under the condition that they fight alongside him in trying to take back the world. And so what they do is they transition to New Metropolis. And when they get there, they basically travel to a military base underground. And this military base has been in existence since Superman first arrived on Earth. Once they get there and they open up this giant room, they find Superman, but he's nothing like the one that we know. Instead, he's emaciated. He's very thin, Superman, and he seems like a normal human being. Now, the reason why this happened, and we can actually kind of skip over the tie-in a little bit here, the reason why this happened was because when Superman first arrived, instead of being discovered by the Kents, and instead of being adopted and taken under their wing where he would eventually become, Clark Kent and eventually become Superman, instead, he was immediately taken by the federal government. And when he was held in stasis with red light, which kept his powers from emerging because he never experienced the yellow sun. He's lived his entire life underground inside this bunker, being held as a prisoner and being used for experimentation. And so once they break in, once they free Superman, this is strange to him because he's never seen people like this before. He's never seen people like him. But more so than that, for Barry Allen, this is wild because he's never seen a Superman that looks like this before. He's always seen a huge, confident, wildly powerful Superman. And so while they're trying, while both, Superman and Barry Allen and the heroes are trying to come to grips with the situation, the soldiers break in and they basically begin the process of running them off. And so while they escape, while they are able to get out, the Superman comes into contact with the yellow sun for the very first time. And he of course begins to fly. He starts showing his display of powers, but he's not in control here. He doesn't have total control over his heat vision. He doesn't have control over his flight. He's learning these things for the very first time. Now he masters them pretty fast, at least in terms of his ability to fly. But he basically, when he's asked by Thomas Wayne, when he's asked, to basically save them, to get them out of there, he takes off and he immediately heads out for the sun. And so as this issue comes to an end, we're basically left with Cyborg, Thomas Wayne, and Barry Allen at the wrong end of guns from US soldiers, and it seems as though they're about to be taken prisoner. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think about this series so far. Again, I love Flashpoint. This is such a well-told story. I hope I'm doing it justice. I really do. It's a really good series, and I hope you guys are getting a lot out of it. But yeah, with that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.